Thank you for checking in to the Co-Management Commons podcast again. I'm excited to chat with a colleague of mine, Jason Akearok, who's based in Iqaluit, and he's the executive director of the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board. And Jason's been there now 9 years and has a lot of experience with the boards, and prior to that had been working with Environment and Climate Change Canada. And he's been involved in some really important files over that period of time, particularly as it relates to the Baffin Island Caribou Herd and the process that the board went through to make some really important decisions on that. So I think you'll find this interview very insightful, and I do hope to interview more co-management practitioners like Jason on the podcast who are working directly in the field. So as usual, if you have any feedback, please be in touch, and I'm really grateful that you're taking the time to check out the podcast. Enjoy. Well, good morning, Jason. It's really great to have you on the Co-Management Commons podcast. We're finally starting to get some freezing cold weather here in Labrador this week. Not even too cold, really, but the fact that it's in the minus 20s is a lot colder than it's been. It's been an unusual winter. I don't know if you've been getting cold weather yet or not.
Morning, Jamie. Yeah, I think we had, I guess maybe a warmer kind of a winter, but this past week or so, we got to, where we're probably supposed to be around like minus 54 with the wind chill. It's not as cold today, it's still cold, minus 40. But you can feel cold when it's minus 54. But that's just the way it's supposed to be. But yeah,
That's
it's
interesting. I keep telling everyone that I really like the cold weather. I'd prefer it over the heat any day. But minus 54 is really cold. So I guess no matter who you are or where you're from, minus 54 is gonna feel cold, I guess.
yeah. This time of the year, like what I look forward to, it is cold, but the sun is coming back, and you notice it every day. It's something to look forward to, and the days are getting longer. It's just a nice feeling to have the sun coming back more and more each day.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because here in my office, I noticed it could be freezing out, but you get the nice bright sun coming in on the window, and it just feels great, and it's a great time of year. I actually really like this, and like you said, it's the way it's supposed to be. But really
Yeah.
excited to hear more about the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board, and obviously this board is one of the better known ones in Canada. There's been so much written about it, and it's such a big part of the wildlife management system in Nunavut. But maybe you could share with us what the board is and all that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. So, it is a institution, a wildlife management institution created through land claims, and the land claims uh, known as the Nunavut Agreement. And through that agreement, the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board was created, and it's been tasked with making wildlife management decisions for the Nunavut settlement area. And people familiar know how big the Nunavut is, and so it's quite, given that it's quite large. There is a lot of wildlife that the NWMB has to make decisions on, from caribou, polar bears, marine mammals, fish, migratory birds, also habitat. And a lot of these are also cross jurisdictions with the Northwest Territories, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Northern Quebec, and Nunavut, and also internationally with Greenland. And the NWMB, the decision makers, are the board of directors, appointed board members by 4 Inuit organizations 4 government organizations with a chairperson nominated by the board and affirmed by the Order and Council in Canada. So we are responsible for making a lot of decisions that are important to Inuit. Again, caribou is important, polar bears, seals, and what have you. And the board is busy getting the information it needs through science, through Inuit knowledge from the public as well, to make decisions on how to best manage wildlife, while fully considering that in Nunavut, the rights holders are Inuit. Their rights are paramount. So whenever you have to consider, for instance, limiting or impacting that right, the board has to first and foremost consider the impact that this has on Inuit and to get information from Inuit and Nunavut. And I think that we keep that in mind whenever decisions have to be made, for instance, lowering the quota and what have you, balanced against the conservation that the board has to make and how we can best manage it in partnership with the government and Inuit for now and for future generations.
Nice. And you're obviously the executive director. I'm curious to learn more about yourself and your background and how you got to be employed by the board. What was your background story, how you got involved?
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I'm originally from Sanayak. It's in further north from here, but now I live in Iqaluit. And so I've lived in Nunavut, all of my life, aside from going to school, university, where I studied biology and I did my master's also. So I've had to, of course, move away for school, but I've always come back. But I've always had an interest in being out on the land. I like to hunt and fish. So one way or the other, through science, but also my own kind of interest in being out hunting and fishing and camping, taking my family out. So given that, I think that, I started off when I was finished school working for the Canadian Wildlife Service as a seabird technician and then a habitat biologist for several years. And then I was appointed to be on the board of the NWMB by the Canadian Wildlife Service. And I was as a board member for over a year. And then, the opportunity to become the executive director opened up and I applied, and fortunate for me, I got it. I've been doing this now for 9 years. I think what interested me to apply was that, that diversity, and I think the influence that the NWMB can have in wildlife management. We are at the center of what I would consider to be really important, species, particularly for Inuit. We're talking caribou again, polar bears and seals and whales and fish. These are things that are important to me too. And I think, being at kind of the center of where we can impact change in policy on wildlife management, I wanted to, so that interested me. And I've been doing this now for 9 years. And we've been through some, I guess, pretty important situations. When I started, the first ever moratorium on Baffin Island Caribou was imposed, followed by a TAH or a quota. So these are significant impacts for, Nunavut. An instance, I think the people probably never thought here in Nunavut that there would ever be a quota for caribou. I remember when I was living here, growing up in the 90s through to 2000s, with no quota and being able to hunt freely, getting caribou, the moratorium, quotas. There are signs of more caribou back on Baffin Island, which is exciting. I look forward to the day again, maybe when there is no quota again. But I think it's a testament maybe to how, the NWMB in partnership with the government and Inuit, working together, with the signs now of caribou coming back. We've also made decisions on Western Nunavut, blue nose east caribou, Bathurst caribou. There are signs of blue nose east coming back again. I know these are very important issues whenever you're talking about limiting Inuit rights, access to wildlife and what have you is very important. We take it very seriously. So these are tough decisions, but ultimately we want to work together and make sure that we can manage wildlife to be able to harvest it, pass it along. And so, it's been very fortunate for me to have done this now for 9 years.
Yeah. Are you surprised that you're at the 9 year mark? Did you think you'd want to be in that sort of environment long term, or did you always know?
Oh, good question. It was hard to say. I think it's more just thinking back 9 years when I think back when I started, what I was doing and kind of the work since, not just myself, but the staff and the board and other partners that I worked with. A lot can happen within that time. And I think it's good. It's just been an enjoyable journey. And it's just reflecting back on it, how long it's been. I never thought about how long necessarily I would be here, but all that time and change since that time to here just makes you think.
It's really interesting because I think about this a lot myself as well. I just recently had my 15th year anniversary with the boards, and the time has flown by, and I often wondered like what happened. And I think, and I've had job satisfaction this whole time. For me, I think it seems to be about learning so much. Like there's so, like you mentioned, diversity. There's so many different species, so many different issues. It never stops getting uncomplicated, and every year is different. And there's so many different things to educate yourself on. That I think that's what has kept me hooked into it. So, and I think it's good for our organizations, like you being there for 9 years. I'm sure they appreciate the stability. I know in some of the academic literature, people have talked about in the earlier days of co-management boards and turnover of staff and board members and stuff like that. It's hard to get momentum going. I'm also really curious now as well to ask about that period that you went through with the caribou total allowable harvest and what that process looked like. I can imagine how difficult it was, but just for people that aren't familiar with co-management, like what kind of process took place for that to be implemented?
Yeah, there are signs I think locally and regionally of kind of less caribou. Personally too, like it was just, having to travel farther by snow machine or in the summertime boating and maybe walking, Baffin here where I live in the South Baffin, southeast, got big hills and what have you. So the terrain can be challenging to walk in snow, maybe take the snow machine as well, but just getting farther and farther and seeing less and less. And then the government of Nunavut did a survey in 2012, and at the time their estimate was 5,000, give or take. And everybody knew, but I think just the steps, what action is going to be done. And there was a proposal to put a moratorium. And the NWMB supported this with the intent of holding an in-person public hearing within a few months. And so what the board did, what we did was we organized the in-person public hearing, and we flew in all the delegates from each of the communities, 13 communities, into Iqaluit, the capital here in Nunavut, and also other parties such as the government, researchers, and any other kind of a party that can contribute to helping the board make a decision. And it was a 3-day in-person public hearing where we got to hear and question and seek clarity from government, from Inuit, and some ideas that they had and what we can do to manage caribou. And out of that, the NWMB made a decision to set a total allowable harvest of 250, male only. And that's had been in place for, can't recall off the top of my head, but I think it was up until 2018 when female caribou, part of the 250, I think about a third of the 250 or maybe a quarter, based on Inuit Knowledge, actually on that one, the Nunavut Wildlife Board brought that proposal. And just recently, too, the Total Allowable Harvest back in 21 was increased, and it's going to be increasing subsequently since for 10 years based on the government's observations and research and Inuit observations of more caribou. And actually this summer, I think it was a very special time because in Iqaluit, especially my observation, I think a lot of young people, they got their caribou for the first time. And you saw it on social media quite a bit about their first caribou. It was a very special time to see and to hear about it. I think, what you look forward to maybe, like when you manage and, when you feel like you can contribute to the successful management, working together to see young people, how happy they were to get their caribou and seeing it on social media and then feeding people, their family, their elders. So it's been difficult. I haven't gotten a caribou myself here on Baffin for some time since the moratorium. But I hope to get an opportunity maybe this summer or some other time to get my caribou again here on Baffin. I should say, hope my daughters actually more so than me that they can get their first caribou. So we'll see.
Nice. Are your daughters expressing an interest now in getting a caribou?
Yeah. I think that we Nunavut, there's caribou on the west and what have you in the Kiwaldik, and I've been fortunate enough to when I've traveled there, get an opportunity to get caribou in the west Kiwaldik area. So we like caribou. It's I think it's my favorite food, and my kids, my daughters, my wife, we all like it. So I think that the next one thing, I hope that they can get their caribou too.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we were recently in some meetings and got some updated science on the George River caribou herd. And as you know, there's a moratorium on that one right now in Labrador. But it looks like there's starting to be some positive calf recruitment. So fingers crossed that the things will start to turn the corner and go the way they are in your area. I know people are really hopeful because one of the things people actually talk a lot about is being sad because a lot of young people are not able to get their first caribou. And not just what people would picture as young people, I guess, anymore either, but people in their 20s and 30s and on, right? So it's been a while now, and people are certainly still hopeful. But I'm just thinking back to the hearing process that you went through. I'm trying to picture in my mind what that looked like, but maybe if you could give us a sense of what some of the feedback was at that time about the idea of putting in a quota and so on. Was there a consensus amongst the delegates that came in, or was it a highly debated topic? I'm trying to get a sense of it.
Yeah, I think, if I can recall, but that was back in 2014. There was, I think, concerns and reservations about a quota, but I think generally there was consensus, at least, that there was less caribou on Baffin. There are some viewpoints that maybe they've moved on to other regions of Nunavut, maybe to the mainland, out to the west of us, but also that this is a cycle. And I think many people understand that caribou do go through cycles. There's instances back in the 40s and 50s on Baffin, for instance, of a less caribou, and that it just takes time for caribou to be able to come back again. So I think there was consensus, at least, that I think there was less. And I think that, the tough job now, I think, for the board was based on what it heard, how can we ensure that we don't contribute to any further declines, or how can we stabilize it? What can we do to maybe get caribou back again? So, at the time, 250 male only was the decision. It wasn't easy, I think, and it's never easy. Whenever the Nunavut Agreement enshrines these rights and access to wildlife, caribou, seals, but this is like fundamental right of an Inuk. So the NWMB and the government have been given authority to limit that, but only through this process. So we have to take it very seriously because this is a right. Whenever you want to consider this imposition, it's very significant. But that was a tough decision. And, I think, it was hard for a lot of Inuit and Nunavut on Baffin, but everybody did agree that there was less caribou.
During your time with the board, has there been any examples so far where a total allowable harvest got removed from a particular species because things recovered well, or was it any need of it?
There are no examples since I've been here, and I don't think since before me too, but of a removal. There's been increases, Baffin caribou, for instance. There's also muskox on throughout Nunavut, where the total allowable harvest has been increased, and also for other species, but a removal, I think that is an option. I think that under the Nunavut Agreement, the board has the authority to establish, modify, or remove a total allowable harvest. So I think that, again, I look forward to the day on Baffin where there is no TAH. I'm not sure what the space here will be like to kind of enable that, but I think that there's something that I look forward to.
Nice. Yeah, I was just curious because sometimes I've been in debates where people will argue, well, once you put it in place, you know that it's never going to get removed. And then others will counter and say, well, if the information changes, just not, it is possible through the agreements that we have. It's just I haven't seen one removed yet either. And I sometimes wonder if we should have put a total allowable harvest in place on moose, for example, in the region where I work. I kind of like to debate with people if that was actually more harmful than good. But I know it's a hot topic. I'm sure we'll be continuing to debate these ones for a long time. But I'm interested to get your take as well on being the executive director of the board, and what do you see as the role of the executive director, just for people that don't know about co-management arrangements and stuff? Like, how do you interpret your work, and what are your main sort of activities day to day?
I consider like the executive director, like making sure that the board of directors have the information that they need to make decisions, the amount of information that the board has to consider. They've been entrusted with making what under the Nunavut Agreement, Article 5 decisions, such as establishment, modification, or removal TH, establishment, modification, removal of a non-quota limitation. These are their decisions. So information that we get from government and other partners, from Inuit, and there's a wealth of information both in writing and presented verbally to the board members. And we help with the analysis, making sure that they have the information they need, making sure that they have this, in a timely way that they can consider it. In Nunavut too, there is, I mentioned the polar bears, there's different management units, different communities that harvest from that. There are different caribou herds. There's also regulations for Arctic char, the water bodies. This is a complex information that we help the board analyze, making sure that they understand this, making sure that they've heard the information from Inuit, from other partners. So I think it's my job just to make sure where I work with the staff. We have a wildlife team that helps with the analysis, legal advice. We are dealing with rights protected under the Nunavut Agreement. Again, I've talked about this is a right, access to wildlife, and limitations, making sure that Inuit have an opportunity. There's a procedure in place to enable Inuit parties to be able to present to the board, to understand what's at stake for them, making sure they have an opportunity to share that information. We make sure that, here at the office where I work from in Iqaluit, that we notify partners of issues coming to the board that will impact them. So I think working with the wildlife team, but also the administrative team, making sure that, of course, the Nunavut Agreement, the board members, when they make a decision, they have to do so in person or a quorum of board members, and making sure that we can organize that they have the information and everything else. All these things fit together. I oversee that. I just make sure with that, and then share that information with the board members for them to make decisions. So that's how I see my role here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You have a unique background as well as with a combination of being an Inuk and being trained in biology. I'm curious on your take of when you're working with the wildlife division, like what's your strategy for making sure the Inuit knowledge gets brought to the board, for example, for decision making? It's just a topic, obviously, we know that's been well documented in the academic literature. So kind of curious how you make sure as much of that makes its way to the board for decision making.
Yeah, I think we're still challenges with it. I think communicating with communities and getting that information out, giving proper notice and time for communities. We do this by informing through email, through social media about upcoming issues that are coming to the board in advance, where the board will meet in person in public setting. And now too, with I guess the benefits of virtual, we make that also an option for parties, Inuit and other stakeholders, government, to connect virtually or to call in if they wish, for instance, to be able to tell the board directly their knowledge. So this is an option that I think that we've been taking advantage of to in communities, instead of necessarily having to travel with potential delays with the weather or flight schedules or the cost and what have you. We make this an option available for the board to use this information. But it's always challenging making sure that we're all working to, how can we better kind of always give proper notice and opportunity for Inuit to be able to share this information. And it's work in progress. Again, social media, virtual connection is now one of the steps we're taking. I think, my observation though is that since I've started, I think a lot of the local wildlife organizations and the regional wildlife organization, I think that they are getting over time more familiar with the NWMB and through our engagement with them, our meetings with them, our just connection through the phone or email, and more aware of kind of how we operate, and I think are more engaged, or just they've always been engaged, but I think I see kind of the means that they can do so, and being able to share that directly has enhanced since I've started.
Yeah, that's really interesting with the idea of letting people call in. It's for some reason it's connecting dots with some of the teaching that I've been doing in the last couple of years. And I know there's technology where students can log in and give video assignments and just talk and share what they learned that way. And you got ideas going in my mind now of ways that could be done of just having people come virtually into meetings and share information directly.
Yeah,
I just
we've had a meeting, for instance, Grise Fjord here is the most northern community in Canada. And then we also had someone at that same meeting connect from St. John's. So, and they were able to share their information. So these are options that I think that, hopefully does enable the board members to consider all this information, and is one of the ways we evolve and change over time and take opportunities such as this.
so is there anything you're working on right now you'd like to get the word out a little bit about? Anything like what's the top priority, would you say, right now with the board?
We are been doing a strategic planning, and I think that one of the things I think that we've been discussing and considering, it's still ongoing, but I think that looking at kind of what we do and how can we make our organization efficient, how can we hear from Inuit, what is our responsibilities under Article 5? Is there some things maybe that we can have less role of because it's not maybe prescribed in Article 5? All in the interest of what can we do better to engage you. And I think that this is ongoing at this time, but I'm looking forward to the outcome of this. And potentially, again, I think the interest is what is our role under Article 5 exactly? What isn't? But how can we do this in a way that meets this responsibility, in particular, getting Inuit knowledge, engaging Inuitums in wildlife management?
That's really interesting. So do you have a process put in place now for the strategic plan, or is it something you're doing in-house or at the board level? Just curious.
Yeah, we have a third party helping us with this, and I think that we're this time just in the middle and kind of looking and talking through it with the board members, with the steering committee of board members and myself, and just trying to chisel down to what is our strategic vision for the next 10 years.
Nice. Well, Jason, this has been a really great chat. And one of the things I've been trying to do a little bit more of in the last couple of years has been trying to find time to do a bit of my own research as well, in addition to my role as executive director. And I just know with your background and the theses that you did in the past with knowledge and so on. Do you get the itch to still try to do some research yourself as well? I know it's challenging, but kind of curious if do you like to get involved in the research stuff?
Strictly academic, I thought about it, but I know we've got a lot of kind of big projects to complete that I think in themselves a mix of academic, policy, and social. I'm looking forward to doing that. I think that I mentioned the strategic planning, and I think that this will help kind of like if we can focus kind of the organization, as I talked about, what is our responsibilities, what is our primary responsibilities that we have to do, what are things we do now that maybe we don't have to do, but might open up kind of what we can do and tackle some of the big projects. So these delve again, I think, academic and social and policy. And I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm hoping that our strategic planning process will kind of carve the way to this side of the organization.
Yeah, and as I ask that question, I now think about how silly the question is in a sense, because you and I are collaborators on a research project called Nanook Narrative. So that's one of the projects I'm actually really excited about and do make sure to carve out time in my schedule. And I really appreciate working with you on that project, and thanks for your help in Iqaluit, navigating the relationships that are needed there and helping us with permit applications and meeting the local HTOs and so on. That one there, we'll certainly be sharing a lot more knowledge about it with people in the next couple of years. So hopefully you're having fun still. I'm really enjoying it.
No, it's been great actually, and I think that I particularly like some of the enthusiasm I've seen locally, and I think that's great to see. And when you can have local um, buy-in, and that's what's happening here. It's just a really exciting project, and thank you for your leadership and keeping this going. So thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I should also give a shout out to our fellow executive director, Tommy Palliser in Nunavut, who's also on that. And he was on the Co-Management Commons podcast and was a lot of fun. So I'm hoping you and Tommy will come back on the podcast again sometime if there's like a current issue or some particular item that you might want to discuss. You take care then and stay warm. And hopefully I'll get to see you soon with any luck.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, thanks very much for this, and likewise, take care and stay warm.
All right, take care. Hi, I'm Dr. Jamie Snook, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Co-Management Commons Show. Honoring the spirit and intent of agreements with Indigenous peoples is an important form of reconciliation and social justice, and educating ourselves about opportunities with co-management is time well spent. This conversation continues, so please like, share, subscribe, and visit www.comanagement.ca. Join me again next time for another interesting discussion about the co-management of fish and wildlife in Canada and around the world.